warm summer night in 1994, Edward transformed from a disciplined soldier into a cold-blooded executioner. He killed his wife Sylvia with a crowbar, nearly beheaded his 7-year-old son, and then hacked to death his innocent 5-year-old daughter. Their home in Marietta, Florida, was drenched in blood. After the murder, he erased all evidence and left his country under another identity, and disappeared into a religious community, leaving only his body and questions. For months, he lived peacefully among strangers, hidden from plain sight until his face was suddenly revealed on national television. And finally, the mask fell off. Why would a father coldly murder his entire family? What twisted thoughts lurk beneath a soldier's ruthless face? And how could a man so dangerous escape justice for so long? Welcome to Death Row Documentary Today. We explore one of Florida's most chilling family tragedies. This is the haunting story of Edward J. Zakrzewski II, a man now counting down the hours on Florida's death row. Two outsiders. The Zexurski family looked like any other. Edward, 29, proudly served in the U.S. Air Force. Sylvia Tuato was a bright, community mother of Edward Jr., 7, and Anna, just 5. They lived in Marietta, a quiet Okaloosa County suburb. Neighbors described Edward as quiet, reserved, maybe a little strict. Sylvia, on the other hand, was lively, friendly, outgoing, always with a warm smile. But inside their home, that perfect image was crumbling. Sylvia was suffocating under Edward's controlling behavior. She threatened divorce more than once, and behind closed doors, Edward issued a terrifying ultimatum. If she tries to leave me, I'll take them all with me. No one believed he meant it. Everyone was wrong. On June 9th, 1994, Edward's son called him at work with a message that would seal their fate. Mom says she's getting a divorce. That was all he needed to hear. Edward quietly left the office during his lunch break, not to get food or clear his head, but to buy a chapati. This was not a crime of passion. It was premeditated. Court records reveal a disturbing timeline. Edward returned home in the middle of the day. He had hidden the knife, crowbar, and rope in strategic locations around the house, the murder tools, each neatly placed. Then he went back to work as if nothing had happened. Later that evening, he even attended college classes, sitting quietly and taking notes just hours after lending the same sharp knife he used to destroy his family. It's the kind of ice-cold calculation that marks the line between a man and a monster. That evening, Edward Zexurski came home like he always did, calm, quiet, collected. Sylvia, his wife, was there. Maybe she was folding laundry. Maybe she had no idea she was already living her final hour. In the background, the kids were probably brushing their teeth, still smelling like bubblegum toothpaste, or laughing at cartoons flickering on the TV. Nothing felt out of place. Edward told his children, with the same tone he might use to ask them to pick up their toys, "Go watch television." Then he waited. When the moment felt right, he picked up the crowbar. With one savage strike, he hit Sylvia in the head. She collapsed, but she was still alive. He dragged her limp body into the bedroom, and this time, he swung harder. Her skull cracked under the blow. Then came the rope tightened around her neck, cutting off the last sounds of struggle. Sylvia fought, she cried, but she never made it out of that room. The house was silent again, but only for a moment. Edward walked to the bathroom door and, in a voice as gentle as ever, called for his 7-year-old son. Little Edward came running, unaware that the woman who once kissed his scraped knees was now lying lifeless in the next room. His father stood waiting, not with open arms, but with a machete. Without hesitation, Zexurski brought the blade down on his son. Again and again, the boy was nearly decapitated. And then there was Anna, just 5 years old. The court records, thankfully, offer few details about her last moments. What little we know is horrifying enough. Edward used the same machete to end her tiny life. 3 murders, minutes apart, all carried out in cold, deliberate silence. No panic, no regret. Once it was done, Edward didn't sit beside the bodies and cry. He didn't call 911. He didn't write a note or leave a message behind. Instead, he cleaned the blood, he packed a bag, and he vanished. He drove to Orlando that night, under the cover of darkness. From there, he boarded a plane to Hawaii, living behind a crime scene, soaked in horror. In paradise, he began a new life, new name, new story, new identity. He found shelter within a deeply religious family running a secluded spiritual commune. For 4 months, he lived among them, eating their food, bowing his head in prayer, sharing sacred spaces, all while hiding the truth. They had unknowingly welcomed a mass murderer into their home. But evil never hides forever. One night, the family gathered in front of the television. A rerun of Unsolved Mysteries came on. Across the screen, a face, a name, a story. A father who killed his wife and children in Florida, then vanished without a trace. A ghost until now. They stared at the screen, and then they looked at the man beside them. It was him. The next morning, they confronted Edward. He didn't deny it. He didn't run. He simply like someone who knew his time pretending was over. The next morning, they confronted Edward. He didn't deny it. He didn't run. He simply like someone who knew his time pretending was over. And then, in one eerie twist of fate, it all unraveled. One evening, the religious commune that had unknowingly harbored a murderer sat down to watch television. The show was Unsolved Mysteries Air, haunting reel of cold cases and vanished souls. But this time, the mystery wasn't distant. He was staring back at them. The screen displayed the face of Edward Zakrzewski, the man sitting just feet away from them. The voiceover spoke of a husband and father who had slaughtered his entire family and disappeared without a trace. The commune froze. Their prayers had been shared with the killer. The next morning, they confronted him. He didn't argue, didn't run. Edward simply gave in, as if he had always known the day would come. He turned himself in without a word, calm, defeated, hollow. In 1996, 2 years after that unimaginable bloodbath, Edward Zexurski pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He didn't deny the slaughter. He didn't try to justify it. The court called his actions brutal, calculated, and atrocious, evil in its purest form. For each life he stole, he was sentenced to death. Thus began a decades-long stay on Florida's death row, as the world slowly moved on and his name faded into forgotten headlines. But death has a clock of its own, and it never stops ticking. Now, in 2025, into a killing field, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed Zexurski's death warrant. The execution is scheduled for July 31st, 6 p.m. If carried out, he will become the 9th person executed in the state. That year, a grim statistic, not seen since 1984. Florida, it seems, is on a relentless march of justice, issuing back-to-back death warrants in a rhythm of cold finality. Just 2 weeks before Zexurski's date, with death, another inmate, Michael Bernard Bell, will face the same fate. But behind the legal documents and execution orders lies a deeper, darker question: what transforms a father into a killer? Psychologists have a name for men like Zakrzewski. These are men who don't see their families as people, but as possessions, reflections of their control, their ego, their image. And when that illusion is shattered by divorce, shame, or betrayal, they don't just break, they destroy. In Edward's mind, Sylvia wasn't just leaving, she was taking the kids, tearing down the life he'd constructed, and humiliating him. So he made sure none of it would happen. He didn't act out of fury. He moved with precision. He bought the weapons. He laid them out like traps. He went to class as if everything was normal. He wasn't raging, he was calculating. Today, Zexurski sits in a silent cell at Florida State Prison in the same place where executions are carried out. The countdown has begun. July 31st creeps closer, and unless a last-minute appeal or executive intervention steps in, the man who once wiped out his entire family will finally face the silence he imposed upon them. But this story isn't just about one man's descent into madness. It's about the chilling truth that the people we trust the most can sometimes be the ones we should fear the most. Edward Zexurski wore a uniform, bowed his head in prayer, tucked his children into bed. But when the mask slipped, the thing beneath it wasn't a father. It was something far more terrifying. And now the question lingers in every listener's mind. Should a man like this be put to death, or should he rot behind steel and concrete until the weight of his crimes crushes him from the inside? Comment below. Your thoughts matter. Subscribe to True Crime Thrills for more bone-chilling stories from the darkest corners of the justice system. And if you know someone who believes family men could never be killers, send them this story, because sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't lurk in shadows. Sometimes they sleep just down the hall.